And we are back at it again with another live one for all you Bi-Conics wrestling nerds out there. And welcome to another edition of the Collision Collective review for AEW Collision this week for December 16th, 2023. It has been a hot minute since we've been back here to review Collision, but I'm super excited to be back to review this episode because this was a fun one. And joining me, I feel like I've announced it officially on other places, but with so many things going on, I never know. But I can officially say that my co-host Luis is now officially on board for the long haul, whether he wants to or not. So, Luis, welcome. Finally, we got you to be a part of a review consistently, hopefully.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I normally do the WWE reviews and then just do the pay-per-views and the PLEs. That's normally when I tag in, but I love the idea of joining Collision because it makes me feel very special because it is the A show for, AEW. It's the one show that you could tell Tony Khan has very little input. I can tell based on the amount of women that are on the match, on the card, the amount of diversity that's on the card. You could tell that Tony Khan has literally nothing to do with this. So it's very exciting.
If you haven't already figured it out, my watching audience, we all have differing opinions about AEW, but what I love and why I asked Luis here is because he's not afraid to share it, and that's what I want here for all of us. We can all have our opinions. And honestly, I feel like I agree with most of them. I do agree with you that Collision, to me, is the A show. I will say, after this week, I will also say that Rampage was a lot better than Dynamite this week. Listen, I said it on the review for Rampage. If they want to just make Rampage where all the crazy fun matches happen, it's just a fun hour of wrestling, then I'm all for it. That main event that's because I love my luchador stuff. You have Commander, Vikingo, and Penta versus Top Flight and Action Andretti. That match was so fun, which definitely helped because this Collision was also a lot of fun too.
Yeah, definitely enjoyed this Collision. Didn't like some of the wins, some of the people that won their matches, but that's just something that's a personal pet peeve of mine. I don't understand the building of someone to just knock them down for somebody that's clearly not going to do anything in the future, but we'll get into that when we talk about the very first match.
Okay, so let's just jump in. So Collision, first and foremost, I love that Collision has the cold open promos from a few people who are going to be involved in matches in the evening. I think that's one of my favorite things, weirdly enough, from a booking and writing perspective, because it feels like, all right, these are the people we're going to see later in the evening. Let's get their initial thoughts, which then leads into our opening match. This is a Continental Classic tournament match for the Blue League. This is match number 10 in the tournament. Yes, I've been keeping track of the match numbers for all this. And this round sees Claudio Castagnoli taking on Andrade El Idolo. So, okay. So, you briefly alluded to it a couple seconds ago, but we'll go through the match a little bit, but straight to the ending. I'm kind of in agreement. I don't see why Claudio needed to win here. I mean, the story that they were telling that Claudio wants to get revenge on Andrade for what he did to Danielson during their match. But for me personally, I'm like, shouldn't Danielson want to come back and get a lick later on Andrade? But it is what it is. Yeah, I don't know. I understand that you want to try to make the tournament like who's going to win, because honestly, Blue League has done a better job of making me guess every single week who's going to end up on top because of how close everyone is at this point towards the end of the match itself. I actually really enjoyed. I think Claudio's a lot of fun. I'm always going to root for my boy Andrade, especially to see Andrade being used so well and booked so well the last couple of weeks. Well, so booked well in the sense that he's picking up wins pretty much every single week. May or may not have something to do with them trying to keep him, but I thought this was a really fun match.
Yeah, I thought the match itself was really good. The both of these guys can really work. I liked there was very minimal mistakes done in the match, which was really good. You could tell that they're pros. I personally have always said this. I believe that Andrade is he's the MVP of Collision. Since the inception of Collision, he has been on almost every single show. He's given us banger after banger after banger. Shout out to Sheamus for that one. And he's just done a really, really good job of showcasing himself. I love the addition of CJ Perry because I'm a massive fan of Rusev and Lana. I thought that they were perfect together. And I was really hoping that they would do this whole CJ would be his mouthpiece. He never spoke, and he only speaks in Spanish. I think that that's the way to get him over. We're watching it happen with Nakamura now. He never speaks English. He speaks English only when he needs to. And it just really positions him as a top level heel. I love how he comes out with a black mask, kind of like, in the DC comics. I really enjoy that. My gripe with this match is to have someone other than Bryan, because right now they're 1-1, right? Bryan and Andrade. To have someone other than Bryan be the guy that beats Andrade or that faces Andrade, and to have someone else beat him, it just makes little to no sense to me, because now, did Claudio get him back? Was that the purpose? I don't know. I don't see Claudio being a AEW World Champ, a Continental Classic World Champ. I don't see him being a Triple Crown Champ. He's just there. I don't understand the purpose of him getting this win. It just doesn't make sense to me, but I believe the professor says it all the time. If it makes sense, they won't do it. So that's one of those things where it's this actually made no sense to me, and they did it. So that's kind of the opposite of what the professor says.
Yeah, I think this is a tough one for me, because it doesn't make a lot of sense, like you said, for Claudio to kind of hand this loss to Andrade. I understand, get back at him in a match that's not a tournament match, if that makes sense. Have them have some sort of match either afterwards, or, if you wanted to throw this on 0 hours, even something for World's End too in 2 weeks, this would have been fine. But I will say, I understand why, because then you're looking at what happens at the end of the night and where everyone stands at the end of Collision, because, spoiler alert, it is really close right now, because we have pretty much a 4-way tie at this moment, and there's only, I think, 2 matches left for Blue League to determine, so we'll get into those matches and what that means for those. But yeah, it doesn't make sense for Andrade to lose to Claudio. Now, had it been someone else in the league, I would have, and it's kind of hard because you want to keep Andrade strong, but again, if he lost to, I don't know, somebody I would have been fine if he lost to Danielson, because it still makes him strong, because it's Danielson. Danielson's the final boss of Blue League, in my opinion, just
well, I feel like
Danielson's the final boss for Gold.
Yeah, I feel like Danielson's going to be the guy who wins it. I think this was created for him.
See, I can see that, though I do have a different opinion on who I think it might be, and personally of who I want it to be.
Who's that?
Don't make fun of me, but I really want Kingston to win the Blue League and then be Triple Crown, only because as somebody who reviews the Ring of Honor show with the other guys, honestly, Danielson will work for me too. I like Danielson. I would love to see Kingston. I just want that title back on Ring of Honor, because it's been sorely missing the last couple weeks since this tournament started. Granted, Eddie has had matches in Ring of Honor, which is a hell of a lot more than our previous Ring of Honor champion. I'm still salty at you, Claudio. You only defended that thing once on Ring of Honor television for almost the year that you had that title too.
Eddie was right about him the whole time.
Yeah, so I love my boy Eddie, but honestly, Eddie, Andrade, or even Danielson, I think I would be cool with. And of course, honestly, anyone in Blue League could have been fine for me, because I'm not a big picky person, but I think those are my top 3. There's still the possibility of maybe Swerve winning Gold, but at this point, I think Mox is winning that one.
Yeah, we'll see. It seems like Swerve is pretty agitated, so I wouldn't be surprised if Swerve cost Mox some matches here.
I think that's what's going to happen, and like I said, I don't mind Swerve losing to Mox. I just hope that when the tournament is all said and done, I don't want the momentum that Swerve has been building for the last couple months to just disappear like it does. It happened to Ricky Starks, and it happened to a bunch of other folks too, where the momentum was happening and then they got thrown into something that halted their momentum.
Well, for Ricky, it was, Tony had to get him away from MJF. That's what happened.
I'm still not over that. I was like, that could have been something great.
But I went to see MJF's movie yesterday, and my God, it was phenomenal. What a phenomenal movie. I didn't understand how they did it, but watching them put Hugh Grant's face on MJF's body was just awesome. It was great. It was really good. I didn't know MJF could move like that, but hey man, you got to take the roles how you take the roles, and he was a really great Oompa Loompa. He did really well.
Damn. Well, I think it also helps too when you have someone like Chavo on set to kind of like help everyone through it as well, because Chavo was there helping all the stuff as well.
Oh no, I didn't watch Iron Claw. I watched Willy Wonka.
Oh my!
He wasn't wearing any lifts. He was using his natural height, and it was like, oh my god, like he looked like such a little man. It was great. I had no idea him and Liv Morgan were the same height. You see all those pictures of them, two of them. I was like, wow, I thought Liv was like 5'4". Yeah.
Oh my goodness!
It's awesome. You know, hey, we're moving forward. We're progressing in the right time, and I just look at it this way, man. Hornswoggle walked, so that way MJF could run. It's amazing.
Well, guys, this has been a great Collision review. I'm just kidding. Listen, this is a lot of fun. This is going to be interesting. But, yeah, final conclusion, I don't think Claudio needed to win this match, but at this point, we can't necessarily complain. It is what it is done. We move on. Speaking of which, we move on from this to something that also really excited me. So we had a singles match between local talent Jasmine Allure taking on the Walking Dead girl themselves, Abidon. Of course, this was a squash match. Abidon wins. I love that we're using Abidon more and more now that they're back. And then, of course, as soon as Abidon is done celebrating, lights go out, Julia Hart comes up. I was like, yes, this is the feud that I want. I never knew I wanted it until they gave it to me a couple weeks ago. But then the more interesting part in itself is Sky comes out. It seems to confirm that now Sky is siding with Julia, and that made me excited. And then I yelled and cried at my television because who makes their way into the ring to help Abidon? But my girl, Thunder, is back, baby. Thunder is back, and I'm so happy.
I was so happy to see Thunder actually go out there and actually be physical. We have been missing her. She is, I know Britt Baker's the name of the division. I get it. But we do know this, that Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa, they made that division. With the both of them together, whether they like each other or not, it's like Shawn Michaels and Brett. They didn't like each other, but they were perfect in the ring together. I was so happy. I just kept thinking, I was like, oh, Abaddon, y la muerta, la bruja. I loved it. I was so excited. And I was like, okay. And now we have Julia Hart and Sky Black, as she was renamed yesterday. So that was pretty cool. Nigel, good off the cuff there. Yeah, I'm excited. This is going to be a really good feud. And let's see where it goes from here. But this was my first indicator that Tony Khan had nothing to do, because the segment got a lot of time. And I was like, there you go. This is Danielson's fingerprints all over this.
Yeah. By the end of Collision, I immediately knew that Tony didn't have his hands on this, because we had 2 women's matches, 2 women's segments. So the women got 4 different spots in the 2-hour show. I looked around, I was like, Tony Khan's not involved in this because we got more.
Yeah.
I was excited to see when they showed Thunder on commentary for the Spanish commentary team. I was like, thank you, because I've heard that she was doing commentary for the Spanish team. And then to see her on camera, I was like, something tells me I might be seeing a little bit more of her later. And sure enough, I also really like that we're kind of pushing Abidon as a face in all this too, which I actually really, really love. And because the crowd is behind Abidon so much. And I'm actually kind of happy to see the crowd quickly attach themselves to Abidon, because I know that, and I'm speaking for JVL here, he is a big Abidon fan, as we both know. And I am excited to finally have everyone else kind of be behind them as well, just as much as he is. So yeah, I'm excited for this tag team match next week that we're getting.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I'm very excited. I love it because it utilizes the women that are being used properly. And to date, AEW really hasn't done that for us. So this is a great way to do that. And obviously with the tag match we'll talk about in a little bit, but we actually have more women on the card, which is what they need, because all of the men have already been showcased for 5 years. You know, they haven't really showcased any of the actual women on the card for a while. And we need this. We definitely need this to happen in AEW if they ever want to compete with WWE.
Absolutely. So from here in this amazing segment, we head backstage where Collision answered my question and my biggest complaint that I had the last couple of weeks. We finally get our trios champions back on TV. So the Acclaim and Daddy Ass himself, talk about how, and they also did the one thing I wanted to. They verbally told the audience to be like, yeah, we're kind of done with MJF because he's kind of a tool. So we're going to be focusing on defending these championships again. I'm like, thank you. That's all I've been asking. I was like, we need to start pulling people away from this black hole storyline of the Devil Saga because there's too many people involved.
Yeah.
But this promo, all it does is sets up is that they're distancing themselves away from MJF. They're focusing on developing and defending these titles. And then who should interrupt but the winners of our Rampage main event the other night? Top Flight in Action Andretti, and this sets up a Trios Championship match next week on Collision. I'm like,
I love it.
Thank you. I want these Trio Championships to be defended. It's been way too long.
Absolutely. I love how Bowens kind of tells them that pick the wrong time to challenge them. Almost like, the Acclaimed they're coming for blood. I love that. Like, you could tell, and I'm sure that it's not just the MJF storyline. I'm sure they're annoyed with all of it. I mean, they win these titles, they get relegated to pre-shows on pay-per-views. They're barely on television. The last time they actually had a match that was of significant value, that it actually played into anything, that it wasn't one of, as I like to say that AEW does, these bingo ball matches, where they just pull two numbers out and they're like, hey, these two are wrestling each other tonight. Absolutely no story, no reason at all. And it's unfair for them, so I wouldn't be surprised if these guys went in there with some fire, almost like, hey, the Revival's not the only team that is over with you guys. We are too. Give us this spotlight, put us on television. So I'm looking forward to that match.
I'm excited for this. And again, it's a fresh new match that we really haven't seen. I don't remember Dante's been injured, so it's been kind of a mixed bag for, his brother and Action and Lee Johnson and all them. But yeah. I'm excited for this match. I was like, it's a match we haven't seen yet on AEW television this year. So I was like, thank you, Collision, for getting us not the same matches all the time. Next is, I really enjoyed this next match too. The AEW International Championship match. We see our champion, Orange Cassidy, defending his title against my boy, the bounty hunter, Brian Keith. Lord have mercy. I was like, I'm so happy to see him on mainstream television because Brian Keith's character is one of my favorite things right now in wrestling. I love the bounty hunter character. It's like, give me Django vibes, but also Reed. I think it's Reed Bass is the historical figure of the sheriff back in the U.S. who would do bounty hunters as well. This match was a lot of fun.
Yeah. I mean, this is just one of those reasons where they prematurely took the title off of Orange Cassidy. You could just tell, that title is meant for a person like him. It's meant for his style. It's meant for the story that they're trying to tell with Orange Cassidy. They clearly don't want to put him in the world title picture just yet. But when I look at Orange Cassidy, I look at the fact that the International Championship is his title. I think we will forever think about that title, and we will forever think about Orange Cassidy. I know we are very quick to say this person's the Mount Rushmore. We're prone to hyperbole in professional wrestling, but I genuinely believe that there is no argument that can be made that Orange Cassidy isn't the best international champion ever. And it's going to take a lot for people to take that from him. Once again, we get a great showcase. Brian Keith, I'm excited as well. I didn't really know much of him until he cut that promo on Bryan Danielson, put him on a wanted poster. And I was like, okay, and then I got into it and I started looking back some of his matches and I was like, this guy's a great talent. This is what I wanted Swan to be, and he wasn't. So I'm very excited about this guy. I want to see more of him, and hopefully he gets a big time contract and stays with this company. They should spend money on him instead of Nick Nemeth.
Honestly, I'm a little hesitant to have people sign with AEW, especially after this year. So if I'm looking at all the promotions, and again, I'm biased because I review the show, but literally with TNA making moves to sign people right now and the people they have signed for the rebrand so far, which I think would be a lot of fun because I've seen matches of them on the independent scene and they were phenomenal. So I'm like, put this on television for people to watch. But man, this match ruled. Orange Cassidy retains the title. I really love the bit at the end. Orange goes to shake Keith's hand afterwards, doesn't shake hands because cowboys don't shake hands, but then he tips the hat And then Cassidy tips the glasses, which I was just like, weirdly enough, I love small little aftermatch moments like that because they enhance like what we just watched. And it was a sign of respect between both of them. I was like, this is great. I love this.
I agree with you.
So from here, we get a quick segment where, again, I've been asking at least to see Miro back on my television screen in some capacity over the last couple weeks. This was a short kind of promo, which is still keeping Miro in the minds and the eyes of the wrestling audience. Again, he's being patient because he's waiting for this tournament to be over, and then he can get his hands on Andrade and talk to CJ as well, which I was just like, you know that match is going to be coming, and I am excited for that match.
Hell yeah. This is the match I wanted to see all along. I wanted this to happen. I think it'll ultimately put CJ and Miro together.
I think so too. I just wanted more from Miro after what I thought was a really, really phenomenally fun big men match from All Out between him and Hobbs. Like that match, I loved it so much. I don't care what nobody says.
It was great,
and so now we're just playing the waiting game until the Continental Classic is over, so that way Miro and Andrade can mix it up. So I'm excited. We then go to a backstage segment where we try to get an interview with Commander, and then, as we have dubbed over on Dynamite, the Next Strong faction with Roderick Strong and the Kingdom interrupt. And essentially this sets up Roderick and Commander are going to have a match on Dynamite. I'm excited for it, but also it's like, oh, okay, so we're pulling him out of the storyline. Cool. So this is my gripe with this whole thing. I really, really enjoy Roderick Strong stuff. I think this is really, really fun to keep it. But it also, on the one hand, I'm excited that they're kind of pulling him out of the MJF storyline a little bit. I think that's because Adam Cole is still injured and giving him something to do. But again, kind of taking your phrase a little bit, like bingo wrestling is just like, we're just going to throw these two. Is this match going to be amazing? Yes. Does it have any story reason? Absolutely not. But it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, that's just what it seems like they're doing. And it's so sad to say because, like, they give us these great moments. We do get this. I mean, I harken back to the Eddie Kingston, Bryan Danielson. 2 weeks of build. That's all we needed. They got recaps of their first match together, and then we got them trash-talking each other with 4 total promos. That's all we got. Very minimal on-screen time. We got the before promo, and then we got the after promo after they wrestled each other. That was enough to sell us on that one match. You can see, hey guys, we can do the same thing, because the one that bothers me the most is the fact that Eddie Kingston wrestled Claudio free on television. We got no promos. We got nothing. Like, I'm a Bryan fan, but you guys worked up Bryan and Eddie instead of working up, like, why didn't you save that for Claudio and Eddie? They actually have a history together. A genuine, real dislike for each other that we can see, and that's kind of what it just drives me nuts. It drives me nuts. And obviously, plus they don't protect their wrestlers enough, because we just had the Golden Jets versus Big Cass and, you know, Ricky, and now we're not going to get that match.
Yeah, and I mean, we are reviewing Collision, but it is within the AEW multiverse of madness, as I like to call it, because Rampage was taped before that announcement on the same day as Dynamite, so Don Callis was also, the Don Callis family was going after the Golden Jets too, and now that gets thrown out of whack because Kenny is out. And I talked about it briefly with Adolfo on Rampage. I honestly don't know what we do now with these tag team titles, because Kenny's out, so the Golden Jets are not a thing. Unless Chris Jericho finds a partner, that's not going to be a thing. I fear that Big Bill and Ricky are going to be spinning their wheels for a little bit, because, you know, now everything has got to get rearranged. I don't want to see the Don Callis family with those titles, because in a weird way, unless it's for a storyline purpose, I don't like wrestlers holding multiple titles within the same company. I mean, with spoiler alert, Kyle Fletcher's your new Ring of Honor television champion after a baller match at Final Battle, but I don't think he needs to also be AEW Tag Team Champion. If anything, I'm interested to see with Kyle what happens when Mark comes back from injury, like, because yeah, this is going to be interesting to say, but this tag team division in AEW right now is a mess with injuries, and then you have your other 2 tag teams, which actually we could talk about them now in their own little feud. So FTR comes out to the ring. They briefly talk about what they went through at Final Battle, which, Lord have mercy, that match was brutal, and it was fantastic. Dax, I think, got the worst of it because him and FTR bald, as we like to call him. I can still see, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot. You had thumbtacks stuck in your skull, sir. That is, oof.
Yeah.
It's never fun. But they cut this promo and they talk about, being able to have tag team matches with some amazing talent across the world. But then they also call out the House of Black. So I'm gonna put not necessarily a trigger warning, but we're about to talk about some really dark shit right now because the imagery that House of Black did in the small proportion that they did, it's kind of similar in the vein as like we never bring mothers into conversations when you're fighting somebody, and House of Black crossed the line, but in a line that makes sense. So lights go out. Buddy and Malachi are on the Titantron. They talk about how FTR is part of their family now. And at first I was confused. I was like, is this where we're going with the story? Wait a minute, hold up. And then when they started explaining, I was like, actually, okay, this actually makes sense. Now this makes sense to me. And then I love them trying to play mind games with FTR and using actual conversations that are happening on the internet. Everyone talks about, Dax, but nobody really talks about Cash. And so trying to cause division amongst them. But then the ultimate disrespect and the darkest imagery, I was like, this is darkest imagery. You have a picture of Dax, his wife, and his child. They burnt it and put it in the trash can. I was like, oh Lord, it's about to go off.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I thought I'm of the minority, and I will be very clear. I'm the 1% that thinks that FTR is an awful tag team. I think that they are the guys in professional wrestling that only care about what happens in the ring, and they don't care about giving you a story at all. That's kind of how I look at it. And so I think they need something like this. In my personal opinion, they need a feud that takes them out of their wheelhouse, because until they do something compelling, they're always going to be the guys that the Usos were filming shaving their backs. That was the most interesting thing I've ever seen FTR do. And I'm just being completely honest. I was just like, okay. I mean, I want the FTR from the Alpha Academy days. I want that team that we saw in NXT that was like, this team could go down as one of the greatest teams of all time. And I don't feel like we've got that. We've got this watered down version of Fear the Revolver, and it's just not really compelling. I'm a big fan of Malachi Black, love Buddy Matthews. I think these two are brilliant together. They're definitely like two Shawn Michaels in one group. That's how I look at them. There's no Marty Jannetty here because they even got the big dog that's in the main event, and he's phenomenal as well. It's a perfect tandem. So we'll see what happens with FTR. I love this. AEW really likes doing this, don't they? With Swerve and Hangman. They're really like bringing families into this stuff, huh?
See, this was more tame version because we talked about this when we were building towards the Texas Death Match. There's just an imagery of seeing, and realistically, we know that there was no child in that crib, but just the imagery alone of seeing Swerve stand over Hangman's child in his nursery, and then also putting the t-shirt on top of the kid in the crib was very uncomfortable. It worked. And for me personally too, this made me, I use uncomfortable in air quotes. It's not like, oh my goodness, this was horrible, they shouldn't have done this. But now it adds an extra dimension to this feud. And I agree with you in the sense that I think FTR in-ring abilities are fantastic. I like their work. I like them in the ring. But they have the opposite problem as most other wrestlers that I like do. Great in-ring, but there's not a character to them. There's not really any storylines. Technically, they're great. They're sound. I don't have to worry about them. But there's nothing nuance-wise to make me care about these characters.
Yes.
I know they're phenomenal wrestlers, but this is wrestling entertainment. FTR has the wrestling part. Now I need the entertainment portion of it.
And the thing is...
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that the teams that they try to emulate, right? Which we've seen this a lot, we've seen people emulate Dynamite Kid. We've seen Dolph Ziggler do it his entire career. He's done a mix match of Shawn Michaels, Mr. Perfect, Billy Gunn. We've seen him do all of this. But when I watch back and when I think about them emulating guys, they're emulating guys like Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson, right? Like that's what they're essentially trying to be. Okay, well that tag team gave you everything. They gave you promos. They were shitty. I mean, The Undertaker talks about it on this podcast this week when he mentions Mount Rushmore of his 4 favorite tag teams of all time. When he talks about Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson and why, it's because they were everything you wanted in a tag team. And I believe these guys have the ability to do that for us. They're just not, which is so strange to me. They have the ability to be mentioned with the Usos. They have that ability, and I just don't understand. They barely ever talk. There's no real story behind them, and I think this is a way to show them in a light in which wrestling fans will be, like you said, uncomfortable. And I think it'll be very exciting to see what happens from here on out. So, and the matches are going to be amazing because the 4 of these guys are going to tear it down.
Oh, absolutely. I'm excited for the match that we get. And honestly, I think in a weird way, I think pairing them up with Buddy and Malachi in the storyline is great, because I think something that, especially Malachi, what he does very well is that we know his in-ring is phenomenal too. But one thing I've always loved about Malachi, even though WWE didn't really treat him right when he made it to main roster, I still am one of the few people that really love this Demon Dad character. I'm gonna read you a creepy story time character. Before he got released, I was like, yo, this is actually kind of exciting. I'm excited. And then he got released. I'm like, oh. But anyways, back to my point. Malachi does an excellent job of creating these nuances of that. He basically plays himself, but just a characterized over-the-top wrestling version of it. I mean, now that with kayfabe being dead, I love seeing the videos that he has with Zelina, because I was just like, yes, I love seeing the humanized portion of it, but Malachi does an excellent job of always creating these characters, and that's why he's one of my favorite character wrestlers and storytellers in professional wrestling right now, because he understands the process of how to develop a character, all the nuances that go with it. Motivations make sense when he does this. And Malachi's been doing this for a very long time. So what I'm hoping is that FTR takes the opportunity to learn from House of Black and how to get those characters, because I want to see, I love FTR, and I think they could have the potential, like you said, to go down in history as some of the best tag team characters we have seen in this modern era. They just need to start giving me more development and charisma, because, again, in-ring's good, but now I need to start seeing the entertainment portion from them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is, when I look at them, they get compared to a lot of people, but my perfect comparison is they're a tag team version of Dean Malenko. They're perfect in the ring, but like I said, I mean, the whole Dean Malenko gimmick where he was a ladies' man, like, it was just like, nah, this ain't it. Like, you need to keep trying. That's kind of how I look at them. So hopefully this brings out what we need to see in them.
Oh, absolutely. From here, we get a quick recap / segment of Keith Lee's last couple of days. Him having a really incredible match against Shane Taylor at Final Battle. And then talking to Lexi afterwards, talking about, I'm not done with him yet. So I have an idea of who him is. At first, I was a little upset about who him was, but we'll get there when we get to, Mogul Embassy and Keith Lee's interaction later, and we'll talk about that. But I'm just happy to finally see Keith Lee back on the ring, back on my television screen.
Yeah.
Finally happy, because I was like, he's been gone for way too long.
Yeah, I agree. I want that Keith Lee pre-WWE. I feel like WWE was, that version of Keith Lee wasn't the best version, but before that, I felt like that was the Keith Lee that we all loved, that we all wanted to see, and we're slowly but surely getting back to it. So I'm excited to see what happens from here on out.
Okay, so this is going to cause some controversy, but from an entertainment standpoint, this next match is my match of the night from an entertainment standpoint. Again, this was also added last minute, so this is a Texas street fight between Kris Statlander and Willow Nightingale versus the team of Mercedes Martinez, Diamante. I don't care. This was so much fun. I really enjoyed this, and it's a street fight, so it's going to be chaos. It's going to be crazy. In my opinion, I think this is the strongest showing that I have seen Diamante have over the last couple months, and that's saying something, because we see her a lot in Ring of Honor. She does great, but since being paired up with Mercedes, perfect, because Mercedes is a 20-plus year veteran in this. She is teaching Diamante to, more in the ring. And of course, I'm a big fan of Kris and Willow, and I feel that Kris works very well in these type of scenarios with the street fights, because her and Mercedes went at it for a lot of this match, and I loved it. And then, of course, I love seeing the juxtaposition of Willow's like bubbly, cute character that she is, then for her to turn on the viciousness in these street fights as well. I'm just like, kudos to all these ladies. I loved it. This was great. Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed myself. I was like 5 again.
Yeah, I definitely agree with it. I agree with you. This was the match of the night for me. And when I looked at it, I was like, they're 3 really great performers. And then they have Diamante there, who's slowly but surely, but she played her part really well. And I thought to myself, I was like, okay, obviously Willow is like the future of pro wrestling. She's going to be a part of that like handful of women that are down the line that we're going to be talking about in the vein of like Becky, Charlotte, Britt Baker, all of these people that mean something to professional wrestling. And she's really stamping her claim now. Kris is a really great servant. Like, she's a serviceable worker. You could tell that there's no real plan for her in place. I feel like she's got a great gimmick, especially with the sign language. I feel like if she was in the other company, she would be really bankable. They're not going to do that here. They could, but Tony's Tony. And I really enjoyed this match itself. When I look at it, I was like, all right, this is exactly like this is great. We got a squash match, and then they gave us a little more outside of the norm. And it didn't just give us a straight one-on-one match or a straight tag team match that can bore the crowd, where they can kind of, because I feel like AEW's fan base isn't really a big women's wrestling fan base either, like especially the live audiences, but this got them excited. It got me excited, and I was pumped, and I loved that the match after this, I love that this is exactly what they need to do in pay-per-views, which we talk about a lot when we review their pay-per-views. This was perfect. You have the crowd so pumped up, and then you just give them something fast. It's perfect.
Oh, absolutely. Again, Collision, one thing I always praise Collision on every time I watch it, whether it's during the reviews or just in the chat, one thing I love is that Collision of all 3 AEW shows, to me, again, I'm weird because most of our strengths here at the Bi-Conics, like we have people who talk about the acting wise and theater background, the way that combat is set up. We have professional wrestling experts around here. My biggest background is booking and writing. So like from a writer standpoint, everything flowed, and Collision continues from top to bottom. Everything flows. Nothing feels like stagnates. Thing makes sense to me of where you put certain things. And I loved it because after this street fight, we get a quick backstage segment with timeless Toni Storm. I love watching Renee try not to crack up all the time she interviews Toni just from the outlandish things she says. But we also got a quick update because I was like, Mariah May was supposed to have a match, wasn't she? And then she's like, I don't know if that's a real thing.
There is such thing as a work visa. And if she doesn't have a work visa here, she can't work. So if it's not
didn't
true,
say work visa,
if they're just adding it to the storyline, it's perfect because, the whole Toni Storm thing is just absolute perfection right now.
Okay. All right. Because I was just like, they didn't use the term work visa. I was just like, what is this American wrestling license? And now that you said work visa, I'm like, oh, that does make a little bit of sense. So, but I thought this was a fun segment. And then, like you said, we just jumped straight into Brian Cage having a squash match with the local talent, and perfect. Listen.
Yeah, I agree. I love it. And actually, I think it was one of my first reviews that we did together, which was a WWE review, where you said that the women always get hurt by the placement of their matches because the match after or the match before is always so good. This is a perfect way to not hurt the women because you have Brian Cage go out there, he just kind of completely just squashes someone in possibly a 90-second to 3-minute match. And it was like, okay, I don't care about this squash match. This is my palate cleanser. I just had my sorbet before I'm about to have my dinner and a 5-course meal. Perfect. Because now these next 2 matches are insane.
They definitely are. So Brian Cage picks up the win here, which then rolls into the backstage segments with the entirety of Mogul Embassy. And so as they're talking, they talk to Lexi. She brings up the fact that Brian Cage has been picking up a couple wins. They are still the Ring of Honor World 6-Man Tag Team Championships after defending them at Final Battle in a really good match against TMDK. I love Shane Hayes. Well, I want to be Shane Hayes when I grow up. Just not taking myself too seriously, but also being vicious when needed to. And, you know, Mogul Embassy is ready to take on 2024, but as they're leaving, Keith Lee comes in and interrupts, talks to Brian Cage. I was like, and just basically tells him, I need you to send him a message. We're not done and I'm coming for him. So I'm like, I see you, AEW. And I had to think about this afterwards. I was initially perturbed. I was like, oh, so now we're going to get Keith Lee versus Swerve when we should have had it like when they split initially. But then I thought about it. I was like, you know what? And I hate to say this. I'm okay with this if that means I get more Swerve, but more importantly, more Keith on like AEW television, period, or wherever they decide to do this, because I've missed Keith Lee. And at least I know that if Swerve gets put into the story with Lee, that means that momentum-wise, he's not going to get thrown to the wayside after the tournament is over. So at least I think that's who Keith Lee's referring to when he says him, but who knows? It could be somebody completely different.
I had the same thought as you. I thought it was Swerve as well.
I hope it's Swerve because it doesn't make sense for it to be anybody else at this point. So from here, the next two things that we're going to talk about, we just get back-to-back Continental Classic matches. So first up, in match 11 of the Blue League, this is Eddie Kingston versus Daniel Garcia. I really enjoyed this match. I will say that commentary did a better job at making me care about this match, but that's because I didn't have to deal with Taz's dumbass speaking nonsense throughout. Listen, I don't know what's going on with Taz. I just need him to take it down a couple notches, and we say this every time we do Dynamite reviews. He's starting to get on my nerves.
I don't think he's a very good commentator. I never thought so. I never thought he was a good commentator with the big machine either. But it didn't take away from this match for me because I feel like Eddie Kingston has been on this run that we've never seen him on before. In position to be a great, and what it's doing is I know you have gripes with him defending the Ring of Honor Championship and his lack thereof. But what it's doing for me is it's showcasing him as like so much more than just a regular Joe. And it's like, okay, this guy's the Ring of Honor World Champ. Well, goddamn, he's having killer match after killer match after killer match. Like, yeah, that's the champion I want. And I've said it before. I've said it on Bi-Conics plenty of times. This is the world champion for AEW. You can say it's the Oompa Loompa. For me, Eddie Kingston is the top champion in the company. This is what a champion does. He's going out there. He's cutting great promos. He's not winning every single match. When he does win a match, he has a match like this where he wrestles baby Bryan Danielson, and he does really well. Like,
yeah, I thought this was a really brutal match, and like you said, you picked up on, you know, slowly chipping away at the entertainer Daniel Garcia, because this match and then his match on 0 Hour for Final Battle reminded me why I love this kid to begin with. Like you said, baby Bryan Danielson, like this. Oh my goodness, Daniel Garcia has had some of my favorite matches before becoming the entertainer. Like his match against Wheeler Yuta, his match against Shibata. Like, this match was amazing. This match was brutal. And of course, I'm biased, but Eddie Kingston does pick up the victory, which makes my little heart squee, which makes a very interesting situation, which we'll talk about after we talk about our main event, which was also a really fun match. Match 12 of the Blue League, Bryan Danielson versus Brody King. Listen, I gotta first, Brody King, I thought did a really phenomenal, and Danielson, both of these men, it was an equilibrium. They both were able to show how amazing they are, but they also allowed the other person to shine as well by doing multiple spots of them just going back and forth. This match also ruled. I like this one too.
I thought the same thing. When I watched this match, I was thinking like with the Brisco brother, but I was a little worried. I was like, man, like this is like a lot of volume for you. It was supposed to be like as Nigel has, you know, so beautifully coined, brittle recently. But when I watched this match, I realized that Brody was protecting him a lot and Bryan was protecting him, and it looked brutal. But what I love about Brody is he reminds me of TNA Abyss, where he looked like he brutalized you, but you were so protected. This was such a great match. I gotta tell you, one of the things that I popped for was the finish, the Ultimate Warrior Hulk Hogan finish, where it's like he hits the third, like, running knee, and he kicks out, but the ref already counted the 3. It reminded me of Warrior pinning Hogan. I was like, that is perfect. It keeps, that little detail keeps Brody King strong. It just keeps him strong because it's like, okay, He didn't just go out there and lose. And this is actually what was missing a while back. This is what was missing out of the big Cass and Bryan Danielson feud in the other company. Because every time Bryan beat him, they didn't do anything to keep Cass strong. This is a great way to keep Brody strong. This, to me, is just like, I wouldn't be surprised if they do this again and we have the Andrade Bryan thing where Brody beats him next time when it has nothing to do with the tournament. So I'm excited. Yeah, I really like this. I really loved how, the way I look at it is Brody, to me, came out looking better than Bryan did, even though Bryan got 3 points. That's how I look at this match.
Exactly. And well, since we're talking about points, we come to the end. So before we get our rating with the Blue League, this has been my critique now that we're almost to the end of the tournament. Initially, when all 6 participants were announced for both Gold and Blue League, I got excited because of the potential matches we were going to get. In my humble opinion, Blue League has been the more entertaining part of the tournament because this is the closest to how it feels to watch the G1 because of how close everybody is. You don't know who it's going to be, and then you start playing scenarios, right? In order for this person to advance, this person needs to win. Like, it feels like this is the closest to G1 we have, and I don't know if it's because Danielson isn't part of this, and, most of the Blue League matches happen on Collision, but this is the closest. My biggest critique I've had with Gold League is that since Mox beat Swerve, and literally has punched his ticket, Gold League to me has been disappointing in the sense that, so out of the 6 people you have involved, really you only really had 3 contenders who were really viable to actually win this thing. Mox, Swerve, and Jay White. Poor Roosh is middling around somewhere, and I was like, how dare you treat my boy Roosh? And then I think what's made me more upset, of course you need to have people to take pins in this thing, but come on. You don't allow Brisco or Lethal to pick up anything in this. I think that's my big gripe with this. I was like, outside of how I personally feel about Jay Lethal as a person, how are you not going to give this man wins? Especially, and also Brisco. That one also made me mad. I'm like, Brisco has picked up no wins. We're about to enter the final round of the tournament.
Well, I posted that the other day. I feel like Tony Khan is really underutilized Ring of Honor talent. He's used them to get over his AEW talent. And we saw it here. Mark Briscoe, and I hate to say this, but I go back to Rey Mysterio. With Eddie's death, it hurt Mysterio personally, but professionally, it was the best thing that happened to him because he capitalized. He was a multiple-time World Heavyweight Champion, won the Royal Rumble. WWE was like, hey, this fan base is going to be behind this guy. The only thing that hurt Rey Mysterio was that Chicago crowd wanted Kurt Angle to retain at WrestleMania. That was the only thing that hurt. But Chicago likes what they like. They're a different place. But when I look at this, you bring in Mark Briscoe and you don't have him win a singles title. He had 2 title matches for the TV and the world. He lost both. Bryan has to be the guy to put this guy over. What I like to say to my son all the time when he likes to point out how bad certain champions are. He likes to say he thinks Austin Theory's U.S. championship was bad. I like to tell him, it could be worse. You could be MJF as AEW world champion. That might be the worst title reign that I've seen since.
I don't know who's going to win the Blue League, man. This is way too close. And this is why I think the Blue League has been the most exciting part for me over Gold League because it's truly anyone's game at this point.
Absolutely agree with you. I'm excited. I think it's gonna close out a great way. I have a fear that Tony will figure out a way to muddle it. That's my only issue. That's the only fear I have. But if they let whoever's running the Continental Classic has done a really great job, at least for Blue. So, just let them keep doing what they're doing because this could be one of the greatest moments for AEW in a very long time. So I'm excited. I love the fact that we have no idea. Like I said earlier, I thought this tournament was created for Bryan, but then you rattled off some names that you're like, yeah, you thought the same thing, but here's this person I could see winning it. So, I love that there's this uncertainty.
Yeah. Well, last thing we got to do now is let's rate this episode. So out of 5 empanadas, again, this might be a little high, but just because of everything involved, and even though I had small little gripes with certain things, I thought this collision was excellent. I'm going to give this a 4 out of 5 empanadas. I thought this was a solid show. I thoroughly was I thoroughly was entertained with every single match that we had. And of course, the Texas Street Fight was just the cherry on top for me. And the fact that it got 4 women on the show, and we had multiple women's matches and segments. The women got 4 things to do this episode. While I still always want more, it should be 50-50. Collision continues to prove that if you're an AEW women's wrestler on the roster, you need to be on Collision because you're at least going to be utilized properly. But 4 out of 5 for me this week.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm giving it a 4 out of 5 as well. I love the show itself. Agree with you. The Texas Street Fight was the match of the night. I love the Eddie Kingston, Daniel Garcia match. Love the Brian Brody King match. Love the segment with House of Black. My one gripe, I guess I would say, is kind of twofold. I don't like that Claudio picked up a win here. I just don't understand what purpose that serves. Usually I'm okay with wins and losses. Like, I understood why Mox beat Swerve. I got it. But this one I didn't get. And my other gripe is, where's the world champion? Like, but what's going on here? Like, you're supposed to be the guy. You know what I mean? Like, you're supposed to be the guy who brings in ratings, brings in stuff. And I just feel like the company's better off without him. I feel like there's been so much talk of him going to the big machine that I don't even know if he's relevant to this company anymore. It seems like it's all about that. And that was my gripe about this company in the summer. All they cared about was CM Punk. Not the product that we were seeing on screen, not the great story that we got. It was all about CM Punk, and he wasn't there. And that's what's happening now. All that anybody's talking about, if you Google AEW right now, it's Tony Khan and Disco Inferno tweeting at each other last night. So once again, the eyes are off the product. And it's about if MJF's going to go to WWE. Cody Rhodes saying, I see him coming over here. Like, what about the product on screen? What about this Continental Classic? You're there at the Iron Claw premiere. You're in the movie. How do we not talk to you on the red carpet? Show me something with your world champion. It's just, that's why I have to give it a 4 out of 5.
Right. Well, that does bring us to the end of this week's AEW Collision review. It's always a pleasure to have you, and I'm so happy to finally have you as an official. Well, I mean, you've been official since we started this whole thing, but now I have finally plugged you into something that weekly everyone will get to see your beautiful face.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. I actually really miss my beard, but it's yeah.
You and me both, apparently.
Yeah, I definitely enjoy the interaction with you. I love being able to talk. I love that out here on the Bi-Conics we get to keep it real. You know, I know that there's going to be some controversial comments that I made. You know, obviously when I talked about Hornswoggle and MJF being the same height, I know people are going to be angry at that. But yeah, I definitely enjoy doing this with you. So.
Course. And as always, if you wanted to see more of our reviews, make sure to check out what we got going on here at the Bi-Conics Wrestling YouTube channel. We've got a lot of stuff. It's a great time. You can follow us all over the social medias at BC WrestlePod for notifications of when videos go live, out of context clips, and some just overall fun stuff as well. And then, of course, you can subscribe to wherever your favorite podcasting network happens to be. We're literally pimping ourselves out here on podcast networks. But for the Bi-Conics Wrestling Podcast, where it is a good time, it is a great time. We talk a lot of smack. It is really, really fun. But from myself, my co-host Luis, and the rest of the Bi-Conics boys here, remember, take care of yourself, love one another, and as always,